Now, my guest definitely needs no introduction to a Canadian audience, at least, and I think to anybody around the world who loves hockey. Is there anybody who can forget the Summit Series in 1972 and that climactic goal scored by Paul Henderson? Paul is an icon in Canada, and he's back. You were here about a year ago, Paul, and you're looking terrific. The first question everybody wants to know before we talk about your book or the jersey or anything is, how is your health? How are you feeling?
Well, I'm doing actually quite well. I could be doing better, obviously. I'm full of cancer, but I'm working very hard, diet-wise, exercise, and I got today. So I'm going to live today the best way I can, but it's, you know I have cancer.
Now, when you were with us the last time, you were heading out on this cross-Canada tour with the jersey, and I remember thinking at the time, how's he going to handle the pressures of that when you are dealing with these health issues? How has it gone so far?
Well, it's gone very well, mainly because my wife comes with me, and she takes good care of me. But, you know, the wonderful thing about the trailer is that people come in and they want to tell me the stories, tell me where they were, what they were doing, and the stories are, you get new ones all the time. And the best thing about it, Jim, it's win-win. Like, there's no downside of that 72 series, and Mitch Goldhart from Smart Centers put that trailer together, and it is fabulous. I mean, it is educational, and it's free, so the people come, there's no cost to it, but you can educate yourself in there, and of course, take 1,000 pictures with the sweater, and man, I wish I'd have kept that sweater. $1.27 million.
yeah, 1.27 million.
That's what it sold for.
Wow. Now, most people who've been around as long as I have remember two things: where they were when President Kennedy was assassinated, and where they were when Paul Henderson scored the big goal. Now, you know where you were at that point. What a lot of people don't realize is that you had scored two winning goals in previous games before that final goal, right?
That's what you call getting very lucky, is what happened. But yeah, I did score it in the winning goal in the 6th game, but that was actually in the 2nd period. But I think the best goal I ever scored in my life was the goal I scored in the 7th game, where there was only about two and a half minutes left, went through the whole team. Now, I wish we'd been watching that one for the last 40 years and not the last one.
Well, but the last one, the big one, you took 2 whacks at it. And as you say in your new book, Crosby took 1 for his big goal, you took 2. Here's the book, by the way, friends. It's called How Hockey Explains Canada. Take a look at this book. It's just a beauty. It's a big hardcover. I suppose it's kind of designed to be a bit of a coffee table book, right?
That's exactly what it is.
It's full of pictures, great stories. Jim Prime is co-author, heavily endorsed, including a foreword by maybe the #1 hockey fan in Canada, the Prime Minister, who, you know, most forwards, Paul, are sort of token forwards. You know, when I was reading it, you know, maybe 5 or 6 paragraphs at the most, 1 page. He goes on and on and on. I mean, it's almost like a small book, his forward.
Well, he's a bit of a historian of the game, it turns out. So, yes, he did a great job, and really appreciative of him doing that. But the best thing about this is these are my 3 grandchildren.
On the cover.
Yeah, Alton, Brindley, and Logan.
Right here?
They live in Oakville, so it was worthwhile doing the book just to get my grandchildren on there.
Well, there you go, right beside Ken Dryden. Is that Ken Dryden there?
Yes, it is.
I think so. Well, it's a book of history. It's a book of culture. It's a book about everything that is Canadian, really, because you talk about how hockey explains everything from Confederation to Don Cherry, everything in between. What about Don Cherry? He's a bit of an icon too, just because of his ebullient commentaries in Coach's Corner now for well over 20 years. What do you think about Don?
Well, he's an icon. Yeah. Now, where other country in the world could he get away with what he's getting away with? Yeah. I mean, and he's probably the most loved guy in hockey, and I love the guy. And I think that's one of the reasons that why hockey explains Canada in a lot of ways. And so I'm a big Don Cherry fan in most cases, but. Like, I am tired of the fighting.
Yeah, he's the Rock'em Sock'em champion, and we've been seeing an awful lot of fighting lately, token fighting, and you're fed up with it.
I'm fed up with the token fighting. When 2 guys go out there and just stage, like a coach sends a goon out, the other one, and they drop their gloves, like I get up and get out of the room. I don't think there's any need of that. Now, when 2 guys get ticked off with each other, they're out there, and in the heat of the moment, they drop their gloves and they get it out of their system. I'm not so much against that, but the stage fighting, and I'm to the point where, and maybe because I've got a couple of grandchildren playing hockey now, 6 and a 10-year-old, I think it's time that we looked at maybe taking it out of the game. So on that stage, I depart from Don Cherry, but other than that, I think Don's a great guy. So patriotic. That's one thing I love about the guy. He is Canadian through and through, and I much respect him.
Which is an interesting point, because in your chapter on how hockey explains culture, Canadian culture, you make the point, and it's really a good point, that many Canadians don't know who they are and don't have a sense of patriotism because they don't have a sense of identity. Hockey somehow has provided identity that nothing else has done in Canada.
Well, and I get stories about it all the time, that people, well, one fellow in the East Coast, he immigrated to Canada in '65. And he says, Paul, I was a Brit living in Canada until September 28, 1972. When you scored that goal, he says, I was never more proud to be Canadian. He said, I knew at that moment I was a Canadian. And so once again backs up the theory that I don't think that anything brings us together the way hockey does. The Olympic hockey, when you see Canada playing United States, I mean the whole, and we're not Easterners or Westerners, what are we? We're Canadian. Yeah. And that's the only thing, maybe besides war, that can bring us together. And so that's why I love the book. I think people are going to say, man, I never thought about that. Or that's a good point, because between, Jim and I talked for hours and hours, and it was an education for me, and I think for Jim also, as we did it.
Well, when you mention how hockey brings us together, you're absolutely right. Not only in terms of our focus, but in terms of our own personal histories. I mean, I grew up playing hockey on a frozen lake in Sudbury, Ontario, and then frozen rinks. On Saturdays, I'd go out and I'd lose 5 pounds in a day as a kid because I played hockey all day. Yeah. And that's the history of so many of us. And then you see that kind of hockey patriotism thing emerge again just recently in the Winter Olympics, when Canadians owned the podium, you remember? There was this great, I've never heard Canadians sing "Oh Canada" with such gusto, other than that '72 Summit Series. There's something about us and sport.